Hi there, this is Alan from Computer Explorers, and here we have another Scratch tutorial. This time we're going to make a game which is an approximation of the Flappy Bird mobile game that was really popular a few years ago. This one's made in Scratch, as the last one was, and hopefully it's a fairly straightforward game. It builds in one way on the previous tutorial in that we're going to add levels to our game. So we've got a bit of code in here which allows us to change things as we get better at the game. So let's have a look at the demo and see what the game looks like to start. This is our game. The basic premise is that you have a bird which you control. He's over on the left hand side of the screen, and a wall will travel towards him from the right hand side of the screen, and he has to pass through the gap in the wall so you can control his up and down movement. He'll kind of be flapping his wings all the time and pointing up or pointing down. And there's a scoring system and also a high scoring system. So let's see if we can get that working. If you touch the wall at any point, the game stops. So we'll try again. Now the gap in the wall moves to a random location each time, which makes things a little bit more difficult to predict. So, my score is 9, and the high score is therefore 9, because that's the best I've done since I started the game. Having seen the game, let's try and break up the various elements of it into chunks so that we can work on each one and then basically tick them off once we've done them. So, the movement of your player is the first thing that we can work on. Next, we can look at the movement of the wall. There's obviously a scoring system there. Then we can look at the levels of the game and how it gets progressively more difficult. And then we can add finishing touches like sound and the high score that you saw on the screen earlier. So, let's open up Scratch and have a look. Here we are in Scratch, and let's just have a quick recap on the various elements of the screen. So, first up we have the library of blocks that are available to us over here on the left hand side. They are split up into a variety of categories and they're all colour coded. So we have the motion blocks, below that the looks blocks, which are purple, the sound blocks, the events in yellow, control in an orangey colour, sensing in light blue, operators, which gives us our mathematical functions in green, and variables in orange. Across the top of the screen we have 3 tabs. The one that we're using at the moment is the coding tab, but we also have costumes and sounds. Costumes is where we can change what our character, our sprite, looks like, and you can see that our current sprite, the cat, has 2 different costumes. Sounds is where we can get new sounds to use within our code. So, back to code, the code tab, and the rest of this screen, because this is the one that we will use for the majority of the time. So the central area is where we put together our scripts, and then over here on the right we have 2 areas. The first is the screen. This is where all of the action happens. It's where our cat is at the moment. And below that we have details of the various different sprites that are available to us. At the moment the cat is the only sprite that we have in our project, and above it we have information about the location of the cat. So the XY location, the size of the cat, and the direction the cat is pointing in. So we can change all of these things, and we will use these to our advantage as we're designing our game. So the first thing we want to do is to get our toucan character, or the bird that we had in the demo that you saw. This means that we're not going to use the cat, so we'll just click on the bin icon here to delete the cat, and we'll use this circular blue button to choose ourselves a new sprite. If I go into the animals category and scroll down, I get to the toucan over here in the bottom right corner, and if I click on him, he is then the sprite that we are able to use for our game. Now, at the moment, the sprite is, or the toucan is in a sort of standing pose, but I'm going to change that so that we can animate him to make him look like he's flying. So if I click on the Costumes tab, I can see that I've got 3 costumes for the toucan. The first one is the standing pose, the second and third are animations for the flying poses that you can put the bird into. So I don't need the the standing pose. I'm going to delete that by clicking on the bin, which just leaves me with these 2. Now, if I arrange the code so that I can get the bird to switch between, or the sprite to switch between these 2 costumes, we can make it look like the bird is flying. So let's just put that together. We can say when the green flag is clicked, the green flag is up here, that's the start of the game. We can then say I want to forever, that's a loop from the control category. Anything we put inside the forever loop will happen as long as the game is running. Then we can go into the looks categories and we can say go to the next costume. Now if I run that, you'll see that it incredibly quickly flicks between the 2 costumes. Probably a bit too quickly because you can't really see what's happening. So I'm going to put a little wait 1 second in there. I'm going to actually change it to wait half a second, so 0.5. That's probably actually a little bit too slow. Maybe we'll make it 0.2. And now we've got a bit of an animation of the bird flying, which is great. So, next thing we want to do is we want the bird to continually fall down the screen so that we can then use our controls to make it move back up the screen, and therefore we guide it through the gaps in the wall. So, to get it to fall down the screen, we'll go to the motion blocks and we will say change Y by -10. The Y-axis is the vertical axis through the screen. So if the bird starts here and we change the Y location by -10, it means that each time that code is run, the bird will move down the screen. Let's just see what that looks like. If we pop that into the code there, you'll see that now the bird is animated to look like it's flying, but also moves down the screen. Our next job is to be able to get the toucan to fly up as well as falling down the screen. Now to do that, we're going to actually put a control in that we can use. So we'll use this when space key pressed block from the events category, and we'll say when we press the events key we will get our toucan to move up. Now when we use the changed Y by -10, the toucan moves down. So if we change Y by a positive number, we should get him to move up. I'm going to make the number 20. So when I press play now, he automatically falls, but as I hit the space key, I can get him to go back up again, which means that I've got some control over where he goes, which is exactly what we want for this game. So we've coded the movement of our player. He moves down the screen automatically, and we use the space bar key to get him to move back up the screen again. Let's move on to the next section, which is the wall, which moves across the screen from right to left. The first thing that we need to do for our new sprite, which is the wall, is to actually design it. So this time, rather than choosing a sprite, I'm going to move up one and I'm going to move to the paint function. And here we can see that we've got a plain canvas that we can draw on. Now we can choose the colour that we want from here. I'm going to choose a red colour, sort of pinky red colour, and we can then draw a rectangle. Now I don't want it to have an outline, so I'm going to click on the outline box and click the red line which is going to strike through the outline, and then I'm going to draw a rectangle. So here we go, one rectangle. That's fantastic. Now I want two of these, so I'm going to right click on it, I'm going to do Control C and then Control V, and I then have two of these rectangles that are exactly the same size. So I'm going to move one down towards the bottom of the screen. It doesn't matter that the lower part of it is off the screen. In fact, that's actually what we want. Then the second one I'm going to move up so that the top of it is off the top of the screen and there is a gap between the two. Now this will be shown on the main screen, and you can see that you've basically got the wall that we were originally working with, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to go back into the coding section so that we can look at how we're going to get to code our wall. So with the wall designed, we now need to program its movement across the screen. So it's going to start over here on the right hand side, and it's going to glide across to the left hand side, and the bird is going to have to make its way through the gap in the middle of the wall. The variable that we want is the variable location of the gap, higher or lower. So to do that, we need to determine what is the highest point that the wall can be and the lowest point. So let's see if we can work that out. So this is about the highest point we can get the wall to be, and you can see that the Y number here, Y determines the vertical height of or the vertical location of the wall. The Y number is 79. We'll call that 80 for a round number. And about the lowest point it can be is minus 129. We'll call that minus 130. So we now need to create a variable. I'll go to the variables blocks here, and you can see there's one that's already created. It's called my variable. If I click on it, I can rename it, and I'm going to call this the wall position, wall pos. Okay, and it's going to be a variable of the Y location of the wall, the Y number. So let's go back to the motion blocks, and we're going to tell the wall that we want it to go to a location. So the X location is right over here on the right hand side. The biggest X location you can do is 280. The Y location we want to be a random number. So we're going to say pick a random number between 80 and minus 130, and then that will be what the wall location is. Okay. So if we then say to the wall, go to that random location called the wall position when we start the game, we should see that the wall will move up and down. So I'm going to just try the green flag. Ignore the bird just for the moment. Each time I click the green flag, you can see that the gap in the wall moves up and down, which is exactly what we want. Now, we want the wall to move across the screen. To get it to do that, we'll go to the motion blocks and grab a glide 1 second to a position, X, Y position. Now, the X position is going to be right over on the left-hand side of the screen. The number for that is minus 280. That takes it all the way across. I'll show you roughly what that is. Oh. You can see there's 233, so 280 will take it right off the screen. I don't know if I can get it there myself. Okay, so glide for, let's say we take 2 seconds to do that. Now the Y location, we want it to be the same as it was at the start, the random number that's been selected. So we'll go into variables and we'll select wall position to go there. If I press the green flag now, the wall goes across, but it just does it the once. What we want it to do is we want it to go back across again. So we'll go to the control blocks and we'll grab a forever block. That way the wall will continue to go backwards and forwards across the screen, but the gap in the wall will always be set at a random location determined by this code. Okay, so for the wall, we've designed it and we've coded its movement, and we've now got the basis of a game. Let's move on now and look at the next section where we put in place a scoring system. Now that the wall is moving the way we want it to, there are a few other small changes we can make to just get the gameplay working. First up, the bird is still at the same size it was when we started, but now that we know the size of the gap in the wall that it's got to go through, you can see that actually that's not leaving much room for error. So I'm going to make my bird a bit smaller. In the panel here that's got details about the bird sprite, the size is indicated as being 100. I'm going to reduce that to 50, and as a result I've now got a lot more margin for error on the bird going through the gap in the wall, which I think will make the game a lot more playable. The next thing that we need to do is we need to put in place a system for the score and also for how you can lose the game. So first up, I've made a new variable and I've called it score. And the first thing I did was put, this is again on the bird code, I put a block in here which says set the score to 0 when you start the game. So you start off with 0. If we then go to the wall sprite, there's nothing in here at the moment about the score, but if we take this block which says change score by 1 and put that into the bottom of the forever loop, that means that every time the wall gets to the left-hand side of the screen, the score will increase by 1. As a result, the bird will have gone through the wall. Now, for that to happen, we need to make sure that we've got a system so that we can lose the game. We can do that very easily. We'll go back to the bird sprite, so this is the code here, and we will put together some code which will say that if the bird touches the wall, then we stop the game. So, we'll get an if-then loop. Inside that, we'll get, from the sensing blocks, a touching mouse pointer block, and we'll change mouse pointer to sprite 1. That's the name of the wall. So if I'm touching sprite 1, then I want the game to stop. If I go into the control blocks, there is a block here called stop all. If you wanted to, you could put a sound effect on this, some sort of sound that made it very obvious that you just finished the game. But I'll just put this in here just to demonstrate how it works. So we'll put that inside the forever loop that we've already got set up. So let's play the game, now with the bird being the right sort of size and with a stop function. So the bird has stopped, but it stopped before, or the wall has stopped, but it stopped before I got a score. So let's try that again. There you go, 1 point, 2 points, and then the game has stopped. I've got 2 points because the wall went through twice. Fantastic, that's great. Now actually, one of the things I noticed while I was playing that was that there is an occasion where I want the bird to be able to move down the screen a little bit more quickly. So I'm going to put in a new piece of code to say, when I press the down arrow, I'm going to change Y by -20. Okay, that means I can actually activate the bird moving down the screen, which will be important if the bird has to be up the top of the screen for one wall, but suddenly has to get down to the bottom of the screen for the next wall. Okay, that feels like we've got a playable game now. So we've now put in place a scoring system, which means that we can actually play the game and challenge each other. Let's have a look at some of the finishing touches that we looked at earlier on when we demonstrated the final game. So we've got sound effects we can put on, we've got a high score function, and we've actually got levels that we can introduce to this game, which make it a little bit more interesting to play through. So let's get on and look at some of those things. First up, I'm going to look at a high scoring mechanism. So to do that, we're going to need a new variable. This will be our third, and we'll click on make a variable. and call it high score. Now, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to constantly compare the current score to the high score, and if that current score goes above the high score, we'll change the high score so that it is what the score is. Sounds complicated, but it actually works. So, if we go for an if-then block, and then look in the operators blocks, and we're going to use this greater than block. Okay, that's the greater than symbol in the middle of this block. We can then say if the score is greater than the high score, if the score is greater than the high score, then set the high score to the score. Means if ever the score it becomes bigger than whatever the high score currently is, then we'll change the high score to whatever that score is now. And that needs to happen all the time, so we'll pop that inside the forever block. You can see that we've now got two images on screen. We've got the score and the high score. I'll put them just over there, out of the way, because over here is really where the action is, in the left hand side. And that way we should have a high score for ourselves. Okay, the other thing from the previous version of the game is the backdrop. Rather than just being a plain white background, the backdrop had an image on it. So if I go down the bottom to this blue button here and choose a new backdrop, there's a whole bunch of options. Seeing as I've got a bird flying around, I'm going to choose outdoor scenes. And I'm going to want to choose some that look roughly the same. So I'm going to go for some animated ones. I'll go for this forest scene. I'm actually going to add 3 of these in. So I'm going to add in a new background. Let's go for, we've had a forest, we'll go for a desert. We'll go for a, let's see, maybe we'll go for space. There you go, outer space. That seems like a good idea. So, if we look at backdrops, I have now got 4 backdrops. An empty plain white one, which I'll now delete. A forest scene, a desert scene, and a space scene. And I'm going to use these as we go through different levels of the game. I'm also going to make some changes to Sprite 1, the wall. So, if I click on Costumes up here, the Costumes tab, I currently have 1 costume. If I right click on this, I can duplicate it. And what I'm going to do is change the colour of the costume. So, change this one to purple. And then we'll choose another contrasting colour that we haven't got already. So maybe we'll go for a blue colour. And we'll change that to blue. So, we now have 3 different costumes and 3 different backgrounds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some code in which says every time my score gets to a certain level, I'm going to change the colour of the wall and change the background so that it looks like I've gone to a whole different level. The gameplay will be the same, but we will make one small change in that we'll get the wall to move that little bit more quickly. So, let's see how we can put that together. Okay, let's see if we can put together some code to give ourselves some different levels. The first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create a new variable. This is the 4th one that we've done, and we're going to call it wall speed. We've had one already called wall position. This one's wall speed. We don't need to see it, so we'll untick the little box here. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to set the wall speed so that the wall glides across the screen at a certain speed at the start of the game. But once we've got a certain number of points, we will increase the speed that it glides at. So, the first thing we're going to need is a green flag clicked. Then we're going to need to say set the wall speed to 2. And we can then put wall speed into this block here. We're doing all this coding on the wall sprite. We can put a wall speed block into the block that says glide 2 seconds in place of the 2, because we know that the wall speed is set to 2 at the start of the game. So nothing will change in terms of the functionality. But because we've got a variable here, we can now change that variable so we can change the speed of the wall. So we'll set the wall speed to 2. Then we need to make some changes. So we'll use an if-then block again, and we'll also use a forever loop. So let's see what we put inside these loops. In the first one, inside the if-then loop, we're going to say, in the operators blocks, another greater than block. We're going to say, if the score is greater than 10, so if the score is greater than 10, set the wall speed to 1.5. Okay? That means that the wall will move from the right to the left in 1.5 seconds rather than 2 seconds. So it will move faster. We also want to say that we are going to change the costume of the wall to the second costume, which is the purple one. So that's costume 2. So we'll switch to costume 2. That way we know that things have changed. And we'll also change the backdrop. The backdrop starts off as forest. We'll change it to desert. Okay, so when you get 10 points, things get a bit more difficult. The wall speeds up, and the whole thing is signified by the wall changing colour and the backdrop changing. Now I'm going to duplicate all of this, and I'm going to say what happens when we get to speed, when we get our score up to 20. So if our score is 20, then we'll make the wall move even faster. It'll only take 1 second to get from one side of the screen to the other. We will then switch our costume to costume 3 for the wall, which means that the wall will go from being purple to being blue, and our backdrop will change to the space backdrop. So that's our most difficult level. So the standard level is in the forest, the next level is going to be in the desert, and the most difficult level is going to be in the space scene. And we'll put these inside the forever loop. Now I've got to see if I can get up to a score of 10 to demonstrate that this will happen, so let's try it out. Not yet. There we go, we can see that the change has happened. The wall is moving that a little bit more quickly. It's a different colour and the background is different. I'm going to see if I can get to the highest level. Yep. And the game still works. So, that's fantastic. Now, there's one last thing that it would be good to add, and that is a bit of sound. So, let's have a look at the sounds that are available to us. If we click on the Sounds tab up here, we can see we've currently got one sound, which is pop. It's not really going to be very useful. So, what we'll do is we'll see if we can add a new sound. Down here, we can choose a new sound. And I kind of want a background sound or a loop, something that can just play continuously. So, if I go to loops here, there's a whole bunch of different things. If you hover your mouse over the play button of each one, you will get the sound that's happening. You just need to find one that you like the idea of. I want something that's got a bit of a sort of a gardeny, maybe a something that's got a bit of an outdoory theme to it, but difficult to find. So for the sake of argument, I'm just going to find one here. Okay, so this is a sound effect that we've chosen. You can choose whichever one you want. We'll go back to our code, and we will say, in a brand new piece of code, we will say, when the green flag is clicked, play sound, the dance snare beat, until done. Now we need to play this until it's done, until it's finished, and then we need to get it to play again. So we'll put it inside a forever loop. And that means that when we play our game now, we have some sound effects to go with it. One of the small problems we've got is that the background to the game and the colour of the wall reverts back or stays at whatever it was last at. So when the green flag is clicked, we actually want it to look like the start of the game. So we'll go back to the looks blocks. We will go back to, when we start the game, we will go to costume 1 for the wall sprite, and we will go to the forest background. So that means we're using the forest, the desert, and the space background. So we start the game now with a pink wall and a forest background, which is exactly what we should have. So that pretty much means the game's done. So that's the finished game. I hope you've enjoyed making it. Not too difficult in the terms of code, but you can see how design is an important part of gameplay, especially given that you're designing the gap in the wall, which is the fundamental way that the game is played. Adding the extra levels, the extra functionality of the levels makes this game a little bit more interesting. You are not limited to the 3 that I've given you in the tutorial. You can add more if you want. You can also have different objects flying through the wall. Hopefully you can find a way to personalise the game and make it your own. That's it for now. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves, and I will see you soon. Thanks for watching.